Business is booming for the Colts as the unofficial start of free agency is underway today. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning of a $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started today. Hello, everyone. I'm Zach Hicks, your favorite co-host here on the Locked On Colts podcast and your resident film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com. We are here talking the start of free agency, the start of the legal tampering period of free agency. So not the actual start of free agency. That will be on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. But today at 12 or noon Eastern time was the start of the, again, legal tampering period. There was already the illegal tampering period at the combine. We're now into the legal tampering period where teams can unofficially agree to deals with unrestricted free agents. So we're going to talk about what the Colts have done today. They've re-signed a lot of their own guys as of recording this podcast. And I want to let you guys know it is 7:54 p.m. Eastern time when I'm recording this. So if they sign somebody in the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes while I'm recording this, then that will be why I didn't talk about it, because I'm recording this show for you guys here again at 7:54 p.m. So again, in between that, if I don't see a signing, that'll be the reason why I don't talk about it here on this show. But we have plenty of roster moves to talk about from multiple re-signings, and then we're going to talk about where the Colts go next after, again, all these re-signings have happened. But to kick today's show off, we're going to talk about the roster moves. Michael Pittman Jr., the belle of the ball, the big free agent that Colts fans were worried about all offseason. Would the Colts tag him? Would they let him go? Will he agree to a long-term deal? Well, the long-term deal did finally happen today. 3 years, $70 million, that a deal that can go up to $71.5 million with $46 million guaranteed. This is a really, really strong deal for both sides. I mean, for Michael Pittman Jr., a receiver who, despite being a guy who's averaged 1,000 yards over the past 3 seasons, he hasn't really had the accolades. Like, he's not been a Pro Bowler. He hasn't been like an All-Pro or anything like that. So to get 3 years at $70 million is pretty good for him. And then for the Colts, with the way this receiver market is going, 3 years, $70 million is kind of a steal for a receiver of Pittman's caliber. So you do have to like the deal for both sides here. Pittman Jr. has a chance to hit the free agent market yet again before the time he turns 30. So that'll be big for him. And look, his deal also aligns perfectly with Anthony Richardson's rookie contract. So if Richardson takes off and becomes this next great quarterback in football, then Pittman Jr. will be due for a giant contract boost before the time he hits 30. And then if Richardson fizzles out and the Colts have to go back to rebuilding, then Pittman Jr. can find another team that he wants to latch on to again by the time he's 30. So it's a great deal for both sides. Colts get their guy. Pittman gets to stay home with his farm and everything like that. So great deal there. Another one, and this was a player who wasn't even scheduled to be a free agent, linebacker Zaire Franklin. He got linked to 3 years, $31.26 million deal through 2027. Colts get their team captain on defense, their leader, their Mike linebacker locked up for the long term. And look, Zaire Franklin was making special teamer money this past season. He never complained. He never held out. He never, required more money to play this past season, even though he was in line to start at the Mike position. But once the season ended, it became time to talk about that deal, rip it up, and get a new one. So the Colts got their Mike linebacker locked up for 3 years, $31 million. And look, your green dots, you got to have those green dots in your defense, and that's what Zaire Franklin is. So getting him locked up for a couple years, fantastic work right there. Glad it didn't come in too much. Again, 3 years, up to $31 million is a good deal for him. And hopefully he can outplay that one and earn an even bigger contract, going forward in his career. Colts also signed nose tackle Grover Stewart, 3 years, $39 million. We don't have the guarantees on that one yet, but 3 years, $39 million is a really great number for Grover Stewart. And I know there's going to be some concern with that one, that Grover Stewart is already 30 years old. He's going to be 33 by the time this deal ends. Will he be able to maintain his level of play up until, age 33? Well, luckily, I did pull up a couple of run defending defensive tackles over the past couple years. Let me just get to my list here of guys who are older than Grover Stewart right now, who've been still performing at a high level in run defense. You got Michael Pierce at age 31, David Onyemata at age 31, John Jenkins with the Raiders last year at age 34, Shelby Harris at 32, Calais Campbell at 37, Al Woods at 36 has still been bouncing around the league. So nose tackles and defensive tackles, they last a little bit longer than other positions. So I'm not too concerned about Grover Stewart going to age 33 on this deal. I think it's a good contract, and likely knowing the Colts, there will be an out after 2 years. So if Grover Stewart does start to decline, you have that out that you can take after 2 years. But not worried about that at all. Grover Stewart is back. The barbecue are coming back to Indy. And if you guys saw my Locked On Now, my little short video I did earlier, I am pumped about that deal. I love me some Grover Stewart. Never wanted him to even touch free agency. Even him being available for 4 hours was heartbreaking for me. Getting him back for 3 years, $39 million. Great win for the Colts. And then Tyquan Lewis, 2 years, $12 million, $7.5 million guaranteed. Very, very good contract for him being a rotational rusher for the Colts. I actually thought, we kind of had a sense coming into this week that would be around the market for Tyquan Lewis. Would be around 2 years, $12 million. For other teams, a good rotational, low-end starting defensive end market for him. And I thought that would be a little too high for the Colts. I thought around $6 million for a rotational guy would be a little bit too much. But ultimately, the Colts did not want to lose him. They didn't want to lose his locker room presence. They didn't want to lose his pressure and his ability to rotate in and affect the passer. I mean, his pressures last year, he was third on the team in pressures, despite playing 37% of the snaps. So he was effective in the time that he did play last year and did a lot of good things for the Colts. So getting him back for 2 years, $12 million, again, just a big leader in the locker room, a guy who's been here for years and a guy that's well respected. You can't complain at all about that kind of deal. So that's all the deals that the Colts have made to bring guys back who were scheduled to hit free agency. Now, one more move did happen today, and that is the Colts lost a Pro Bowler. They lost their Pro Bowl quarterback, Gardner Minshew. He's heading to the Las Vegas Raiders to have a chance to compete for the starting role with Aiden O'Connell. I believe it was 2 years up to $25 million. It's more like 2 years, $15 million, which actually would net the Colts a fifth-round comp pick as of right now if the Colts don't sign anybody else. I don't expect that to happen, but as of right now, the Colts are on the board of the fifth-round comp pick for next year. But Gardner Minshew, look, man, we got to salute the job he did last year. Did a great job, nearly got the Colts into the playoffs. Did a lot of really fun and chaotic things for us, and we can't complain too much about what he did. So Gardner, it was fun, man. It was fun celebrating the stash. It was fun that 1 week where me and Jake shaved our beards to wear the stash because he got that win. I can't remember which win it was at this point, but it was really fun just enjoying the ride with Gardner Minshew, and good luck there in Vegas. I mean, he gets a chance to start. He wasn't going to get that here in Indy. I'm glad he gets to go somewhere where he has a chance to start. And he'll do some good things for the Raiders. Hopefully. I'm rooting for the guy. I love following him this year, despite how chaotic it was. So I'm hoping he gets a chance to start out there in Vegas. One more thing I did want to say about this section before we move on to our next section is, I got a lot of questions from people today, like what's the cap space look like? How much cap space do the Colts have left? Honestly, there's such a wide range of what the cap space could look like right now because the two of the bigger deals that the Colts signed, the Pittman Jr. and the Zaire Franklin deals, they could have added more cap space to the Colts. Pittman Jr. was scheduled to make $21 million on the franchise tag, and that was factored into the cap space. If the Colts include the signing bonus with their extension and stuff, his cap hit for this first season could be like $10 million, which would free up $11+ million in cap space for the Colts. Same with Zaire Franklin, where they could have done a signing bonus that factored into, again, some other things with this first year, which lowered his cap hit for this year while raising it for other years. So we don't know exactly how much cap space the Colts have. It could be anywhere from $50 million to $30 million. Like, it really could be anywhere in that range. So we're gonna have to see the official numbers when they come out and what the per year numbers look like on each of these deals. But for anyone concerned about where the Colts are at in cap space, they're fine. They are fine. They're going to have at least $30 million probably after all these deals go through. with more than enough space to re-sign guys like Kenny Moore, other in-house guys, and look outside for, impact free agents. So don't get too worried about that cap space. The Colts have plenty of it. But coming up, we're going to talk about more in-house guys. The Colts obviously like to retain their own guys before branching out to actual free agency. So what other in-house guys do the Colts have to sign before we start jumping into actual free agency for the Colts? But first, passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, baby. With all the parts you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Locked On Colts everydayers. I just paused the show so I could check and see if anybody got re-signed. In the meantime there, it didn't, so that's good. I'm glad to be able to jump back in here and actually talk about this section without some breaking news ruining it for me. But we're going to talk about other Colts in-house free agents that are options to be re-signed. So I didn't include guys like Tony Brown or Isaiah McKenzie because, look, those guys aren't coming back to the Colts. We don't even have to pretend. Obviously, they got suspended late last season. But we're talking about the other key guys that the Colts could look to re-sign again before jumping into outside free agency. And the biggest one there is slot cornerback Kenny Moore II. His market is probably the most fascinating of all the Colts in-house free agents because there's a really wide range of where he could get paid this offseason. If you're looking at Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus and his contract projections, which are always very good, like very great contract projections, I think he had the Tyquan Lewis deal down perfectly earlier this week. I think it was 2 years, 12 million with like 7.5 guaranteed. And I think that's exactly what Tyquan Lewis got. I think his Grover Stewart projection was pretty much spot on as well. So he's been just spot on this year, and he is every single year with his projections. But he had Kenny Moore at like, I want to say 2 years, like $6.25 million was his projection for Kenny Moore. Now, knowing what we know from Kenny and knowing how we know how he rates himself and rates himself across the league, I don't know if that'll be enough for him. I mean, initially, I think he could come back down to that, obviously. But I think when he first sees a deal like that, he wouldn't take it right away, even after exploring his options. Like, he would still hold out for a little bit more across the league. So if that's the going rate for Kenny Moore II right now, I do think it would be more of a process for him. It'd be more of maybe like a next week type signing for him. But if the Colts are just desperate to keep him, they want to get him re-signed before other people could come in and maybe offer more, then you can maybe do like a 2-year, 16, 17, $18 million deal, maybe pay just a little bit more just to get him back. And then you go from there. So we'll see exactly what that market looks like. Again, this Kenny Moore II signing could happen anytime as early as while I'm recording the show to tomorrow to next week. And it might not even be with the Colts. There are rumored a lot of suitors for him. The Eagles are apparently lurking and kind of interested in his services. So we'll see what happens with Kenny. I do think ultimately he's going to end up back with the Colts. He loves it here in Indy. He had a really good turnaround season last year. He loves his teammates. Zaire Franklin, him are really close. So I do think ultimately he does end up back with the Colts, but we'll see. Again, I think, again, just my gut feeling here. This has nothing to do with any sources or rumors or anything, but my gut feeling is the Colts made an offer similar to what Brad Spielberger projected with Pro Football Focus, like the 2 years, $6.5 million contract. And Kenny's trying to see if he can get more somewhere or get more from someone else and then come back to the Colts and have the Colts match that for a little bit more. So again, we'll have to see. It's going to be a little bit of a waiting game, I think, with Kenny. But ultimately, I do think he'll be back with the Colts. We'll just have to keep an eye on that market there. Another one that's really interesting is running back Zach Moss. Now, we've heard all offseason and in recent weeks that Zach Moss and the Colts are both open to a return. Like, neither side would be against a return to the Colts. And Zach Moss obviously loves it here in Indy. He had his breakout season this past year in Indy, had a really good chemistry with this offense and worked really well, even in the games where he was the backup to Jonathan Taylor. So I don't think that, like, I think the Colts are more of his fallback. I think if he can't get a starting running back job somewhere else, he is looking at that fallback option with the Colts. And as we look around the league, the starting running back positions are kind of drying up. You're looking at maybe Dallas, but Dallas is probably in line for an Aaron Jones type signing. Maybe you look at a team like Cleveland because Nick Chubb might take a little bit longer to come back from his injury. So maybe Moss looks at like the Brown situation and says, okay, cool, maybe I can start there for a little bit and get an extended chance there. Maybe the Texans, but you never know with that one. The Texans, I think, are interesting because he's had great games against the Texans, and we know that teams in free agency value players who dominate against them in regular season games. So we'll see where Moss ends up. I know he wants a starting job, but if he doesn't get a starting job, I do think a return to the Colts is certainly on the table. And I think the Colts are certainly, waiting out his market to see if he shops around, doesn't get the offer he wants, and can come back to the Colts on like a 1 or 2 year deal. I think that would be optimal for both sides. So I'm not going to rule out a Zach Moss return. I definitely think that could be in the cards, but we'll certainly see there. And the other big one, too, is Julian Blackman, the safety who had a breakout season last year, 4 interceptions before getting injured late in the year and missing the last 2.5 games. Blackman has always been a really, really good producer for the Colts, but he just hasn't stayed healthy in his career. And I think that's the one thing holding the Colts back from giving him an extension right now. That injury history, especially with how deep the safety class is right now. I mean, even with guys like Xavier McKinney off the board, you still have a lot of quality safeties that are available in free agency. So there's no reason to really rush to get Blackman back. He's probably someone who's slipping between the cracks a little bit. I'm sure he's getting offers and interest from teams, but it's probably not what he wants right now. It's probably not what other teams want right now. So the Colts can afford to be a little patient with Blackman. I'm sure they want him back. I'm sure they would gladly take him back. But I don't think that one's as pressing as some of these other ones here. So again, it's another market kind of like Kenny's where you're going to wait it out. You're going to see exactly what can happen. And maybe somewhere down the line, you can work out a reunion here. But Julian Blackman's certainly a name to watch. And then 2 more guys who aren't as big in names, but they're certainly guys to watch who I think at least the first guy here will be back, but that's Danny Pinter. I feel pretty confident saying Danny Pinter is going to be back. I don't think there's many other teams around the league who value him as much as the Colts do, especially being a local kid. He went to Ball State, had some good time here with the Colts, coming off a major injury. I just think like a 1 year, like vet minimum type deal with the Colts makes a lot of sense for both sides. Get him in here for training camp, let him compete with Wesley French, see who wins that battle in camp, and go from there. It's kind of an innocuous type deal, but I think it could work for both sides there. And then punter Rigoberto Sanchez. I'm sure the Colts are looking around and doing their due diligence to see if there's another punter out there that they would like. But ultimately, I do think they're going to come back to Rigo and bring him back for the Colts. I mean, it might not be a super long-term deal or anything like that, but I'm sure they'll get him back here on like a 1 or 2 year deal. They like his directional punting. They like that he had a better year last year than 2 years ago, or than a couple years before. So I think it'll be best for both sides to get him back here. So Rigoberto, I believe, will be back as well. I could see all 5 of those guys being back. Probably the smart money's on over under around 3.5 of those guys being back, but I could see all 5. I could certainly see all 5 coming back. It's still early in free agency. Looking at my watch here, we're 8 hours into the legal tampering period. So we'll certainly see what happens with those guys there, but still a lot of work to be done, even on the in-house guys there with the Colts. But what's next in the second wave of outside free agency? Who are the Colts going to look at? What could they look to add onto this roster in that second wave of free agency? We're going to talk about that here coming up in just a second. But first, say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. Look, you can pick who's going to win it all. And you know what? All you guys here in Indiana, I'm sure you're all betting on Purdue to win it all. Purdue is bound to win it one of these years, right? Come on, guys. It's Purdue. They're going to be a 1 seed probably, or a 2 seed, whatever it's going to be there. It's time they finally win, right? Well, make sure you can put your money where your mouth is and go to fanduel.com. Just visit fanduel.com/locked on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Alrighty, Colts fans. Now, what's next in wave two for the Indianapolis Colts? Will Bargain Bin Ballard go out of his way to sign big name free agents and bring in all the superstars that are certainly out there on the market? You know how teams are. They love letting superstar players hit the free agent market. But to being serious here, I think one clear need that did open up for the Colts today with the Gardner Minshew departure is that backup quarterback need. I think Tyrod Taylor makes a lot of sense for the Colts. I think they could go the draft route. They could go with one of those, early round bust quarterbacks that seem to bounce around the league every single year. The Sam Darnolds or Zach Wilson. Maybe a trade for a Justin Fields. You never know with that kind of move there. But backup quarterback is certainly one area they could still spend this offseason. I think I would put money on Tyrod Taylor, but it comes down to what his market looks like there. As for other free agents, I think it comes down to what the Colts are doing with Kenny Moore first. They're waiting to see, again, will he accept their offer? Will he ultimately be back? Because look, if Kenny's not back, then the rest of your free agent focus goes to that secondary. You don't have a veteran in the room in the secondary at all anymore. If Kenny's not back, you don't have that flexibility of having your nickel corner locked up. So that's going to be the biggest thing there, is what's going to happen with Kenny Moore the second. So I think, again, before we see anything else really moving for the Colts, we got to wait on Kenny, see what's going to happen with Kenny. Now, if it starts getting to like next week or something, then obviously the Colts will start moving towards other pieces and getting other guys in here. But as long as Kenny's waiting these next couple of days, I do think a lot of what the Colts are going to do is depending on what Kenny is going to do with his next contract. But aside from him, I think, the safety market's still looking pretty good, still looking pretty clean. You got your high-end guys like Justin Simmons and Quadre Diggs. You could definitely bring those guys in. You got the kind of mid-tier to lower-tier guys like Jordan Whitehead, Jeremy Chin, Ashton Davis. Cam Curl is still out there as well. So a lot of safeties the Colts could still look at. Veteran cornerbacks, Steven Nelson, Michael Davis. My boy Rock Ya-Sin is still out there. Darius Williams. So look, this free agent market is still active. It's still fine. Like it's not, I know so many people, they overreact to the first day of legal tampering where it's like, oh man, the Christian Wilkins and the Xavier McKinney's are off the board. The top tier guys at every position are off the board. But look, where you win free agency is in those mid-tier guys. I know everyone calls Chris Ballard Bargain Bin Ballard, but for instance, let's look at the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, one of their biggest outside free agency signings over the past couple years, and a big reason why they won the Super Bowl this past year, was that Drew Tranquill signing at linebacker. Drew Tranquill was a fantastic player for them. I'm not saying he's the biggest reason why they won the Super Bowl, but just an outstanding outside free agent they brought in who did a lot of great things for them, and they quickly re-signed him the second this offseason started. That's a player who changed more games this past season for them than their giant signing of Jawan Taylor, who they probably are regretting signing at this point because he led the league in penalties and just wasn't a great tackle for them. So I'm not saying that, like, at the end of the day, you never take the big swing at a big free agent, but these mid-tier guys are what really changes the flow of things for you. That's where you get your Danico Autry's that the Colts have gotten over the years, your Samson Ebukams, those type of players that really do change things. So I think when you're looking at this safety and cornerback market, it sucks not having a guy like Xavier McKinney, but is Xavier McKinney worth the $17 to $20 million a year that he's making compared to getting a Jordan Whitehead, who is a really good player, for $4 million or $5 million or $6 million, or getting a Jeremy Chin, for $2 million? Like, again, there's time to take that big swing, but there's also time where you can be savvy with it. You can bring players in who are on the up and up, or players who can just be utility players for your team that can improve what you're doing. Now, where will Chris Ballard take that swing? If he will take that swing, where will that swing be? And I think, again, one thing we've talked about these past couple of weeks is that trade market for L'Jarius Sneed. L'Jarius Sneed, the cornerback for the Kansas City Chiefs, it looks like after that Chris Jones big signing from last week, that Sneed is almost certainly going to be on his way out from the Chiefs. There is going to be a fairly robust market for him, market for him. There will be teams involved, but I think we're starting to see what his market's going to look like on the trade block. We had two big trades that happened today. Carlton Davis got moved with 2 6th-round picks for a third to the Detroit Lions. So the Detroit Lions might be out of the Snead sweepstakes. They moved for Carlton Davis instead. So the Colts, lose a competitor there, and you kind of see what the cornerback market looks like. And then franchise tagged edge rusher Brian Burns was traded for a second rounder and a fifth. And Brian Burns arguably has more trade value to him than a L'Jarius Sneed does, where Burns is younger and a productive pass rusher. Sneed is a little bit older, cornerback who's had some knee issues. So, where is this Sneed trade market settling at? And I think it's settling more at like a third and a fourth, or maybe 2/3 or something like that for Sneed, compared to what Burns got, which is a second and a fifth. Now, I know the Kansas City Chiefs want to hold out as long as they can to see if they can get a first for Sneed, or get, some desperate team who missed out on cornerbacks in free agency to trade something much more than what they really should be getting for Sneed. But I think as of right now, again, I kind of said this a while ago, I think it's going to be the equivalence of a mid-second round pick for L'Jarius Sneed. So either, the Colts trade 46 straight up for him, or they trade their third plus a fourth, or their third plus a conditional fourth, or something like that to acquire Sneed. I don't know if Colts will be that team that acquires Sneed at the end of the day, but I do think they're going to be in that race until he ultimately gets moved. That's a player they really like. Chris Ballard obviously has connections to the Chiefs front office. They have a good relationship. And I do think that the Colts are going to be in that market for a while here, which might limit some of their other free agent spending because they want to be on that trade market. But we'll see. I think that would be the big move, though, if Ballard makes that big move this offseason. Sneed makes a lot of sense. Good, valuable player on, two-time Super Bowl winner with the Chiefs. Really, really good young, or, not young, but like 27-year-old corner. So not super young, not super old or anything like that. But he would change this defense quite a bit. So keep an eye on that. We're still monitoring that trade market to see where it's going to be. But I do think it's going to be more of a third and a fourth, or a third and a fifth, compared to, what Brian Burns got moved for, which is a second and a fifth. I think Burns is just a more valuable player on the trade market than a L'Jarius Sneed. So Burns getting moved for a second and a fifth makes me pretty optimistic that Sneed's trade market's not going to be too crazy. But we'll see what happens these next couple of days. We're going to be following closely with the Indianapolis Colts. We're going to see what they do in wave 2 of free agency, and see, if they can make that big splash move that everybody wants them to make, or that everybody wants the Colts to make every single season. Before we get out of here today, though, guys, I want to let you guys know the Indy Draft Guides pre-orders are still open for $8.99 in code DRAFTMISS. You get access to an essential piece of reading for Colts fans both before and after the draft, featuring 225 in-depth scouting reports, features, and much more. Click the link in our show notes to pre-order today. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings and reviews, and we'll see you guys back here tomorrow to continue this free agent frenzy.